Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. So today we're going to talk about this thing about versatility of the CFA Charterholders. Now, of course, CFA being a chartered financial analyst, most of the folks who work are in the financial industry. But then there are also others amongst the Charterholders who also have ventured into the other fields. And this is why we are here today. And we are very fortunate to have with us here 4 CFA Charterholders who have also moved on to other parts, other sectors, other industries. Now, before I begin, a quick introduction about myself. My name is Chong Jun Yong. I'm a director from the CFA Society of Malaysia. So let's begin. Now, we're not going to go and introduce everyone one round. Instead, what I would like to do is to let each of the panelists introduce themselves. First of all, do you know that you can now be a bank? Not a banker, because a banker is just for the bank, but really become a bank itself. You can then, you probably was wondering, what am I? Okay. So, our first speaker today, KP, right? It's from this company called Funding Societies. So, can you share a bit about your career journey so far? And perhaps you might even learn the secret of becoming a bank.
Sure. Thanks, Yun Yung. I think I'll put the relevant disclaimer so that we
Sure,
don't get called
sure.
out by the regulators tomorrow. So Funding Society is not a bank, but we are a peer-to-peer platform operator recognized by the Securities Commission in Malaysia. So what we do is basically we provide financing to underserved SMEs funded directly by institutional investors, high net worth investors like Regional, other panelists, retail investors like myself. So basically, in Funding Societies, I did the position of high net worth investors to platform to fund deals with them.
I understand you are the head of the strategic investor. So this is individual investors or?
Yeah, so in Funding Society, internally, high net worth and institutional investors as under the umbrella of strategic investors where they are under my so-called responsibility. So prior to Funding Society, coincidentally, I was with the Securities Commission for several years. Information across the various working groups. So I'm banking, management, structured products, etc. So that's a bit about it.
I mean, just for information of our audience, in Malaysia, if you work in the financial industries, there's 2 big organizations that you really know. Right? I think everyone knows Bank Negara Malaysia. It appears on the pieces of paper in our wallet. There's also the Securities Commission, which actually regulates capital markets. Anything that is termed as securities. Am I right?
Yep, securities and derivatives.
So you were in SC. What were you doing in SC?
So I spent quite a lot of years in supervision, basically auditing the fund management industry, the investment banking, to ensure they abide by the relevant conduct, ensure the market and all of that and whatnot. But besides that, I do have some experience in market development. I think, not sure how many of you know, but in this part of the world, generally the regulators have 2 mandates, where it's both supervision and market development.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't think you actually mentioned how to become a bank, right? Okay, you have a disclaimer there. So, Funding Society it's a peer-to-peer platform. Maybe you can just elaborate a bit more. What do you mean by peer-to-peer?
Right. So basically, we provide financing to everybody SMEs. So every SMEs that require financing, they come to us. We have a team that vet through all the deals to ensure that they meet the necessary criteria for us to put on our platform. So peer-to-peer meaning is funded by investors like yourself and myself.
So even I can lend to these SMEs.
Yes.
Okay. So that's where the becoming a bank comes.
So yeah, but I think so. Going back to the whole securities framework. So from an investor point of view, it is an investment product backed by financing to all these SMEs.
So your job is to look for the borrowers, am I right?
No, I look for the investors to ensure that the SMEs can get the financing they need.
Okay, I think we'll come back to you in a bit, right? So, KB has worked with FC before, which I mentioned earlier that one of the big two regulators in Malaysia. We are also very fortunate to have another panelist who previously worked with BNM or Bank Negara Malaysia. And next, we have Bowling, who's actually now working in one of the toughest industry in the current economic environment. So it's really fortunate that she's able to spare time here to be with us. She's from AirAsia and she looks after the government relations and global affairs. So, Pauline, can you just share a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, like Jin Yong said, I actually started my career with Bank Negara Malaysia several years back when I was involved in a lot of policy making related stuff. So I was in monetary policy where I look at the financial sector, the capital market, risk associated with the financial sector, and then inflation, economics related stuff. And then before moving to a foreign exchange department where I look at FX related policy, like whether you can bring money in, bring foreign exchange in, bring ringgit out, how much are you allowed to invest in overseas, all sort of policies related to that. Then after 7 years, I would say, that I moved on to PwC Malaysia, where I joined the deal strategy team, then in the advisory arm of PwC, where I work help clients to do a lot of market assessment, market entry strategy, due diligence, as well as business plan strategy. Then after about 2 years, I think, then I moved on to where I am now, which is a very exciting industry. I'm now with AirAsia, particularly in the global affairs and government relations team, where we help the company to advocate, to lobby for policies and regulations and support from the government. So we are the link between the company and the governments.
So you have to meet the ministers, the regulators?
Yeah, so sometimes we go with the bosses and then we meet with the ministers or the government agencies to kind of discuss and to kind of lobby for the policies that are beneficial to the industry.
Your job title has global affairs, so I presume it's not just Malaysia?
Yes, because as you guys know, one, aviation is not a very localized industry. It actually transcends to regional, global, to wherever your company or your airlines will fly to. So that's one. And secondly, as AirAsia is not just a Malaysian company, we are now an ASEAN company, and we have offices not just in Malaysia alone, we have offices all around ASEAN and in Asia, wider Asia as well. So because of that, my role also transcends to cut across not just a Malaysia policy, but we also look at global policy and policies in countries where we operate.
So do you need to travel? Do you get to travel?
I can't travel now, unfortunately.
When did you join AirAsia?
I joined earlier this year, like 2nd January.
Okay, so just before everything got shut down.
Yes, right. So I did travel for work right before the lockdown.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong, I understand that just like the financial services industry, which is heavily regulated, the aviation industry also has a lot of regulations in place.
Yes. So, and in aviation industry, it's complicated in the sense that because, when we talk about flight rights, the freedom.
So I cannot just simply fly across other people's countries.
Correct. Then you need to negotiate with other countries in whether your plane can fly across, and then if your plane can fly across, or can it take passengers, and then can it fly and then just stop over. Those are the different types of regulation. That's one part of it. And then you still need to have permits to land, and then your parking rights. It comes a lot. And then internally in the plane itself, what sort of SOP that you need to follow, and then like all the safety regulation, and even now it's even more, yeah, because you need to ensure, because we started operating the domestic flights, so what do we do to ensure that our guests are safe when they're flying with us? Yeah, so this requires a lot of communication with the regulators as well to make sure that it's safe.
Okay, thank you so much for that sharing. We'll definitely come back to you more, right? So from peer-to-peer lending to airlines, what's next? Property development, but not property development in Malaysia, overseas, right? Yes, we have here Yifong, who is the Group Financial Controller for EcoWorld International. So to those of you wondering, hey, I thought I've seen EcoWorld projects in Malaysia. Probably Yifong will be able to explain that when she's actually giving us, sharing her career journey so far. So Yifong.
Yeah. Okay. As for the Malaysian projects, actually there's two public listed company, under the EcoWorld group. So one actually houses the Malaysian project. The other one is actually the international arm. So I'm with the international arm.
So you are the Group Financial Controller for EcoWorld International.
EcoWorld International actually has projects in UK and as well as Australia. Actually, for me, my career is basically a very typical accountant career. So I started with a degree in accounting, and then I started my career with Ernst & Young as an auditor.
Yep.
And during my stint in Ernst & Young, I actually completed the qualified professional qualified accountant course, as well as the qualifying experience as an accountant. So that's the beginning part of my career. Of course, I have, as from an auditor, I actually moved on to commercial, and I joined quite a fair bit of organization, mostly conglomerates, and from local businesses to regional businesses in Asia, as well as now internationally. At one point, I was based in Singapore.
Okay. And I noticed that they are actually very different industries, and some were listed entities and some were, well, the current one is listed.
Yes.
Right? So, okay, that's interesting. Last but not least, right, you meet a person who is used to work in the industry which I'm very close to because I was from that industry, which is the treasury, interbank markets banking industry. We have Alan here, who's now with a very, very famous Chinese company, made even more famous by President Trump. You probably can guess who that is, or rather which company that is. Now, Alan is the Regional Treasury Manager at Huawei. So, Alan, can you share a bit about your career so far?
Sure. Before I start, first of all, I'd like to thank CFA for actually having us in this CFA Carnival. So, a little bit introduction about myself. I'm Alan. Actually, my role is APAC Regional Senior Treasury Manager with Huawei Technologies. Before with Huawei, I actually had 4 years working experience as an FX dealer in the treasury market. Okay, and as for now, I'm actually the role of the corporate treasury. Okay, and mostly my role will be oversee those APAC regions. The core functions will be like cash management and liquidity planning and control, and also digital payment solutions. Of course, when it comes to treasury, this kind of sector, we must always constantly provide treasury solutions to the subsidiaries, which is across the APAC.
Maybe you can elaborate a bit more what you mean, because you used to work in a bank, now you're working in corporate treasury. So they're both core treasuries, but actually, in a nutshell, how would you describe your role where you are now?
Okay, all right. I think in banking industry, the treasury little bit different because it
You say you were an FX dealer, so what is that?
FX dealers, okay. Okay, basically in banking industry, basically act as like a sell side. Okay, and as FX dealers, our day-to-day routine job would be like analyze the FX market by using technical analysis and also fundamental analysis. So first of all, we have to do a buying and selling kind of trading based on our view, and of course with the kind of information from those macroeconomics on the specific currencies. So basically, we will trade buying high and selling low, okay, according to trading strategies. And on top of that, besides doing this kind of proprietary trading, as FX dealer, we also deal with customers, and we also provide advisories to those customers on hedging strategies, because they corporates those details. They normally will call us and share with us about view on the specific currency. For example, you want to purchase a CNY and definitely to ask about that.
So how does that experience translate into how you go now in corporate, not just a corporate, but a multinational?
Okay, because previously from banking, we had the kind of the skill set to analyze the currencies and to have the market views on the currency move. And when it comes to this multinational, we act as like a buy side. So from there, we definitely have the view by using those Bloomberg terminal and we analyze. And with that, we can actually use this kind of skill set to apply on our cash management, which is whenever we have this kind of liquidity, for example, we have an incoming CNY or outgoing CNY, we can actually use whatever we have learned previously as a banker and then apply the hedging strategies. And also we can also, based on the chart, we look for the best price to enter.
So can I summarize, or am I right to say that when you were the bank, you were the service provider, now you're the corporate side, you are the customer, essentially?
Yes.
Okay. Now, one thing that I would like all the audience to know is that you can actually also submit questions during this event. There's a link provided in the Facebook live page. Right? So there's this thing called the meeting house. So you can submit your questions for any of us, and later on at the later part of this session, we will actually pick some of these questions and see how we can address that. Now, moving back to our topic at hand today. So of course, we are now talking to all fellow CFA Charterholders. So I think the burning question I have right now is that, first of all, when did you all take up your CFA program? Let's go reverse now. Alan.
Okay, I took that, I think, during 2015. Okay, reason, I think as soon as I graduated from the university, I realized that the financial knowledge that I learned from the undergraduate wasn't good enough. So hence I was like, looking around to seek for the qualification that actually can gain the highest respect and also open many doors in career path in futures.
For your university, I'm not going to mention which university it's from, but I think that's a very valid point in the sense that I think everybody now has a bachelor's degree. Yeah, not everybody, but a lot of people have. So the CFA program definitely helps to give you an added advantage. I'm not saying that the bachelor's degree is not important. It is still important, but that is just the bare minimum. So yeah, thanks for sharing. Eva, what about yourself? When did you take up enroll yourself in the CFA program? Not an easy decision, right?
Yes. Well, you actually remind me of my age. Although I try to console, age is just a number.
It's just a number.
So that actually takes me back to about 2 decades ago. So that's when I'm still in my 20s, almost hitting 30. So after being a qualified accountant, the beginning part of my career journey, so then I started to, look for something to do, to add on to what I have actually gained at that time.
So why CFA? Because there were so many other professional qualifications.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I think Alan have mentioned some of it. Firstly, I think knowledge-wise, it will complement my background as an accountant. Why I say so is that maybe I can share an example. Since Alan has actually spoken about paging, say for example in paging, so as an accountant, you learn about the double entries of page accounting. Okay, so you understand the double entries, how to prepare financial statements, while as the CFA course actually provides knowledge on what are the paging instruments, what are the various type of paging instruments, which are derivatives, and how are they valued actually. So,
did you get to use those knowledge in your line of work even until now?
Yes, until now, actually precisely now we also, because in being in the international arm of EcoWorld,
Yep.
so we actually deal with pound, ringgit, and Aussie dollar.
So you have exposure to different markets.
Yes, we have exposure to in terms of advances to our subsidiaries and JVs, and also funding purposes, and at the end of the day we will have to extract value, dividend from all these entities. So of course we have borrowings in ringgit or even in foreign currencies. So basically we have to deal with all these issues.
Thank you. Cool. When and why CFA?
Yeah, I took my CFA at the start of my career, right after my undergrad. So I think similar reasons at the start, really, if you ask me at that time, what do I want to do? I can't tell you exactly, like, I want to be in this. So to me at that time, CFA was a good choice because one, I had an interest, I've always had an interest in finance. And two, I think CFA was...
Sorry, before that, what was your background in terms of your undergrad?
I did economics.
Okay.
Yeah. But when in uni, I always try to, whenever I can choose, I would try to pick some finance course. Hence the interest after that. So then when I decided to do CFA, it's because of the interest in finance. And also at that time, it was quite a highly regarded qualification. And to me, it opens up, it will open up to many doors in the future. I mean, in case if I want to change career. And also thirdly, it's because at that time I was actually looking at a capital market portfolio. But I was at the start of my career. So a newbie out of uni come out, you have to look at bond yield and flows, capital flows and pricing. Then I was, it's kind of like, it makes me feel like I kind of need to upskill myself. So that also kind of pushed me to doing CFA as well.
Would it be right to describe that the CFA program is closer to practical real-world applications compared to what you actually learn in the uni?
Definitely, because at that time the CFA curriculum is, because I don't know how has the curriculum changed, but to me CFA curriculum is very broad, so it actually exposes you not just actually, if you think about it, it's not just finance, and it's not just corporate finance. It actually exposes you to like capital market, equity, bonds, derivatives,
All the different asset classes.
Accounting as well, econ as well. So
I didn't like that part.
so if you think
No
about
offense.
it, it's really quite broad,
Right.
and it kind of equips you with the necessary information knowledge that you need.
I think some of you may have heard that the CFA program is one of the toughest programs to actually enroll in and to study and to pass. You mentioned that it's broad, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not just broad, but within each of the topic, it goes really in depth. Right? So I think that's where the value, I believe, comes into play. Okay. So thank you. KP.
So I started my CFA paper level 1 actually a few years after I started working. I mean, even back in uni, I've always been interested in investments, and I was already familiar with the CFA curriculum or qualification even back then. Of course, I got busy with work, but I think after a few years, I finally bowed down to peer pressure.
Peer pressure.
Partly that, and I think partly also, I think I feel that there's a need to equip myself with, additional knowledge, and also for a long-term career development, right? So obviously, I was deciding between a few different qualifications, and I think finally I go with CFA because that's closest to heart, right? As in, I've always been interested in investment.
Okay. In fact, even myself, the original reason why I took the CFA program was because I wasn't actually in the financial services industry in the earlier part of my career, but I was in the stock market. So in those days, you still get annual reports sent to you in hard copies in the mail, very thick. I'm not sure what to do with it. A lot of words and a lot of numbers. A friend told me about this program and I said, hey, yeah, why not? So that at least I know what am I putting my hard-earned money into. So that was how I got started, just myself. Now, Yvonne, maybe you can tell us a bit about a day in the life of your job right now. What's a typical day like?
Typical. Well, other than the usual, which is the, reviewing financial statements, I think nowadays, during the pandemic times, quite a lot of focus is actually being emphasized on revising forecasts and scenario analysis, basically to help management to make decision making. Of course, more decisions and probably with even more intense interval in between, during times like this. And in that regard, we also actually involved in cross-department, cross-country collaboration with our counterparts and various parties involved, in tweaking the strategies and also executing on new trends so that we are able to maximize our revenue and, of course, optimize costs in the process. And, of course, with the ultimate aim to deliver value to shareholders.
Right. Wow. So it looks like you're not just maintaining and managing the bookkeeping. There's a whole lot more than that. So would it be right to say that you also are involved in the business and strategic decisions of the company?
Yes. Of course, assisting my superiors and senior management in the process, to make decisions and how do we then tweak our strategies and how to address the current situation.
Right. One of the topics that we covered extensively in the CFA programs, of course, the topic of valuation. How does valuation come into play within the property development sector?
Valuation is quite important, in a couple of aspects. Firstly, I think valuation actually determines the marketability of the company's product. Because property, of course, you need value, to it, and it affects how you market and how best to market the product. And in terms of valuation of existing assets, if you are during tough times like this, you're actually trying to defend the asset value from any impairment. Or potentially, perhaps, for disposal, the sale consideration for disposal, basically to monetize asset, to increase liquidity for the company. And if let's say you're talking about new assets,
Yep.
Then valuation actually determines the purchase consideration for potential land acquisition or to the value of a JV, the joint venture for property development.
Sounds familiar. Some of the things I think I've learned when we took the program. KP or Alan, let's see. Now, financial analyst, that's the two words behind it. So the first thing that comes to mind is a lot of numbers. But is it really all about numbers only? What do you have to say about that? When it comes to your job, is it only all about numbers? Because we always say, oh, CFA, so you Excel wizard and all that. But is it really about numbers?
Okay, I think in terms of investment, I think there are two parts to it, right? So the quantitative and the qualitative part. I think obviously when it comes to investment, you can't run away from the number.
For sure.
So you need to understand the risk and return of each different asset classes, you know. But I think a more important part is also the qualitative part, where I think you need to understand, at least in my role, what does different segments of the investor want and what is their preference in terms of risk and return objectives. And this is the area where it's not so much number, but really talking to the investor, understanding what do they want to achieve, right? So for instance, if you are talking to a pension fund, you can't sell them the riskier products, right? So if you're talking to a high net worth, they probably have a longer term horizon. And you have to understand at what life cycle they are. So if they are probably at an older stage, you probably don't sell them the riskier product as well. So that is the so-called non-number parts in my job.
Right. Helen, what do you think? Is it only numbers?
Basically, I quite strongly agree with the KP in terms of there will be two parts. For my role, I'll definitely highly correlated with numbers as well when it comes to cash management and liquidity. So basically, you need those numbers and also to use it for a hedging purpose. And so you need to monitor about your cash flow and you need to make a cash flow projection. And all is highly correlated with the corporate finance. However, there are some things that are just outside beyond from the numbers, because from my experience, which is I work as a corporate treasury, there will be a lot of things like special ad hoc projects that basically need your treasury solution expertise. For example, because I've been covering APAC, and one of the countries, it will be Papua New Guinea in Southern Pacific Islands.
Okay.
All right, so that country basically itself, it is a trapped cash country where the country itself experiences a scarcity of dollar. So basically, you want to get a dollar to remit out from the country, very difficult. You have to queue the FX order for maybe 6 months or more than that. So in order to solve this, so it's just more than the numbers. You need to find out the solutions. How do you actually collaborate?
Did you go to the ground?
Yes.
So you actually went to the country itself, worked with the regulators there?
Yes. I travel to Papua New Guinea quite often, and also Fiji as well. And reason for you to go there, because you have to set up a meeting, and then you work together with all those regulatories to find solutions to use other alternative currencies to run it out. So basically, all this is become like a project basis. You meet and you develop banking relationships. So this kind of thing is just more than the numbers. It's more like the soft skills, how you actually solve the solutions. And other than that, for those developed countries, of course, not so, they do not experience those remittance kind of issues. But when it comes to developed countries, we are more on to the e-commerce side, like how we set up like digital payment solutions to work together with those e-wallets, to work together with a payment gateway. So it's more like setting up something new, which cannot be measured by numbers, but it can be measured by sustainability. That once you set up all this kind of thing, it will actually become a seamless experience for those users whenever they purchase mobile phones through the e-commerce website,
Right.
Or the apps.
think, yeah, if I may just add on
Sure.
to my points on the understanding investment preference, I think it's all coming back. I think CFA has a very extensive curriculum on investor behavior, and I think it's a very structured way to sort of have a basic or solid foundation in approaching this matter, and then gradually you build on with real life experience.
Are you referring to the behavioral finance
Yeah,
part?
yeah.
So whereby humans are not rational. In school we are taught 1 + 1 = 2, but in the real world sometimes 1 + 1 can be 2 point something. Okay, maybe that's not a very good analogy, but because the financial markets at the end of the day, who's behind it is all just people. Although having said that, we have these things like algo traders and all that, but still they're all programmed by people. So very good point you brought up.
And I think the last point is, I think there's also a point where I think I missed. It's actually a point that resonates very closely with me in my previous job. So there's a whole chapter on ethics. Yeah, I think so. When you go through a curriculum, I think a lot of things where you think, why can't I do this, right? But actually, there's a very good reason behind it, right? And sometimes, I think that especially I think investment and finance is a very trust-based industry.
Yes.
So I think it's crucial to get that portion right. And I think if I'm not wrong, CFA does place a heavy emphasis on that. But you correct me if I'm.
Yes, ethics is a big part. It exists in all 3 levels, and for the candidates who are doing it, that is one level one topic that we cannot ignore. You're right on that. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. So Asia is a very large organization, but I presume your team and yourself, you are the one that face the government, but I don't think you go there alone. So how do you actually function? How do you actually, because you mentioned about one of your jobs is to lobby to actually get the policies that will be able to facilitate your company's business. Can you elaborate a bit more on your day job?
Yeah, so being in an airline company, aviation is highly regulated, as everyone knows. So our relationship with the government is very, very important. So it's not just me, of course, then definitely my bosses, like senior management, they have very good relationship with the government and the ministers as well. So what my team actually does is we try to come up with policies, and we try to push forward policies that are beneficial to the industry as a whole. And we will put forth these policies to them. And then that's when we will set up meeting with the ministers, the relevant ministers, even the PM, the MOF, and then depending on which one are we meeting, and then the one who's going to meet them will be on seniority as well. But internally, my department also strategize in terms of what sort of policy that we should come up with. So it's not so. When I was in Bank Negara, I would always think, policy should come from regulators. But now that I'm in private sector, it's actually, I see that it's actually not. So there's a lot of times that we actually originate the idea and we push forth the idea to the government. Even before they implement.
Consultative.
Yeah, because it's we believe that we need to maintain that relationship with the government, and because we are the practitioner, we are the industry, we actually know best what's happening on the ground. And it's only beneficial to the whole industry and to the people that we feed back the right information to them so that they can make informed decisions when they're making policy. So that's why we have this consultative relationship ongoing. The one ministry that we work most closely with is the Ministry of Transport, definitely. But as everyone knows that now Asia is not just an airline, we have expanded to tech as well, travel tech, lifestyle, right? So we are also working with other ministries as well to work on policies, initiatives that are beneficial not just to our company but to the people itself. Like how can we help SMEs? How can we help the machi-pachi out there?
Right.
Things like that. So it's not just, I would say, not just about us anymore, but it's really how we can work together with government to bring a bigger group of the economy.
Are you able to give an example of how the skill sets, the knowledge that you've gained from the CFA program have actually helped in your current role?
Yeah, definitely. So in my current role, definitely CFA is not a prerequisite, right? But I would say it has helped me a lot in one way or another. For instance, like I say, we work with other teams as well to push forward policies or initiatives that we want to discuss with the government. And one example would be when we want to explain our hedging strategy, our hedging position with the government. And I would say the CFA knowledge actually came in very handy. And because I had that knowledge that when the Treasury team came to me and they kind of present mark-to-market position, their FX, their UH position, counterparties. So all these jargons actually does make sense to me, which I don't think it makes sense if I did not do CFA. So in that sense, I was able to kind of understand what they're trying to say and kind of simplify it and make layman-fy it and make it in a layman manner when we want to present it to the government. Because understandably, not all government officials have finance background. So if we talk about mark-to-market, tango or your, yeah, all that jargons come out and then, you will just see blank face with the government. So you also need to have that skill. You need to know, you need to make it as simple as possible so that your message can be sent across.
Okay, I'm just taking a look at some of the questions that popped up. I think there's one question is actually addressed to KP, but I'll address it to both of you because the question is, how is it different to work with the regulator than in the industry? Maybe KP, you can go first.
Actually, in my current role, I think it makes things easier. So having a experience with the regulator and in the industry, it makes the whole, so like Colin had mentioned earlier, the whole consultative process with the regulator much easier than in the industry. So basically, I have a first-hand knowledge of what the regulators are actually looking for. So for instance, because P2P industry is relatively new in Malaysia, I think the regulators are very accommodative and very supportive in the sense that they do want to develop the industry further, and hence there's a lot of open communications between both the SE and the industry. And having experienced both sides, you are able to get the points across much easier in that sense. In terms of difference, definitely they are. For instance, so your objectives are different. So when you are in the SE, your objective is to ensure a fair, orderly market. In the industry, not too much difference because ultimately a fair and orderly market is beneficial for the entire industry. But at the same time, you have P&L profit. So for instance, let me give you an example. So for instance, if regulators come out with a certain policy, for instance, a new draft guidelines. So you need to be able to sort of feedback to the regulators, okay, this particular paragraph is good for the industry, but when it comes to implementation, could we look at it this way? Because very often so the devils are always in the details, right? How you implement a particular policy. Yes. So that's key.
Yes. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree, definitely agree with KP. One is really the objective is different. So, and when you are in a regulator, you actually need to ensure the highest standard is being upheld, because when you come up with a policy, it's one that's being followed by the whole economy or the whole sector. So the precision, the accuracy, that it's actually very important, and the work that's put into to churn out a piece of probably just one paragraph, it's actually a lot of work that's being put in when you are in a regulator. When you're on the other side, when you're in a private sector, efficiency comes out very important. So it's a balance, right? So but being in the private sector, having had the the experience in the regulator, so I will understand, okay, what are the regulators thinking? Why are they taking time, come back to us? We always complain government take very long, very long.
Yes,
but
I did that also.
Yeah, so we kind of, having gone there, then we also kind of understand, okay, because they need to go through layers, they need to go through processes to ensure what they say is right. They cannot, it's not always not good to have policy written. So they will try to minimize the occurrence of that. And when they come up with something, they try to make sure, okay, this is the right one. Because they are the authority, they need to be.
It affects everyone.
Yeah, it affects everyone. You don't want them to come out one day to say A and then the next day to say B. So that's why it takes time. And having understand that, when you're on the other side, you kind of understand their conditions, why are they doing certain things. So it's easier to then build that relationship.
Right.
And then when you want to see them with information to help them expedite certain processes, so you know what information to see, but you know what are the concerns, and when you speak to them, you straight away know what sort of messages you need to highlight, so that you can address their concerns. Then only you come up with the message that you want.
Right. Okay. There's this question. I believe it's addressed to Miss Ho, so that would be you. Right? So this one is saying, if your child just graduated from high school, do you recommend him or her to study accounting or finance? Assuming your child does not have any preference, plus can only pick one, probably because the parent can really afford to send for one. Do you have any opinion on that?
I think if you like something that is more, if you are a thinker, I think you go for finance. But if you like very routine, bookkeeping, very fixed kind of work style, that means you just go office, you have a fixed money, you just have a very, very routine kind of work. Then you do accounting. Because it's a matter of just preparing, financial statements or processing transactions, repeatedly. So it depends on the person's flair, talent, passion.
So passion and interest would be one. Okay. Related to that, I think this would be the question I will pose to both of you, because I think the two of you are also closer to the tech scene. So fintech is a buzzword that has been around, I think, for the last 5 years. So here's a question. If a fresh graduate or someone who just started working, and they say, oh, there's fin, there's tech. So should I do CFA or should I learn Python or Perl, one of those programming languages? Which one would be a better use of my time? Anyone can go first.
I will go first.
Yeah, sure.
So like you mentioned, right, so it's fintech, right? So it's a combination of finance and tech. I think ultimately, I think depends on what is your preference. You may have slightly more preference on finance side or slightly more preference on tech side. You can choose to start with either path. But I think gradually, what you learn as you progress through the career, the concept of T-shaped talent become very important. So T-shaped talent meaning you have in-depth knowledge in one field, but you also need to gradually understand the other fields. Basically to work better with other teams, understanding their problems, work more efficiently. So I think, long answer short, you need to do both. But of course, you can choose to specialize or go deeper in either area.
Particular area.
Yeah. Right. Of course, if you are a Superman, then by all means, go deep in both, right?
Right. And I guess it's relatively easy to do nowadays with all the online courses available. Do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think nowadays, if you look into this era, human and machine, they all work together. Like for example, human rely on something, maybe like smartphones or iPads or autonomous car, whatever thing, including drones as well. So of course, when I relate into finance, we can actually use the most relevant example, which is algorithm traders. Okay, first of all, they have a kind of financial background as well. And however, if they have this kind of, they learn this kind of computer programming language, they know how to use this kind of language to program, to tweak, to make it like a machine learning. So basically, it will become a perfect combination because first of all, you understand the finance concept, and then at the other end, you know this kind of computer language which help you to make better decisions. Okay, which I read a book before, quoted by Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio previously, yeah, he also used this kind of method and to embed it into like algorithm learning. And then right now, when times evolve, they have a good machine learning kind of setup for them to make a better decision. So this is a very nowadays human and machine, they are highly correlated and work together. So I think both are quite quintessential. Okay, sure.
Yeah, I think going by that point, I'd like to highlight something which is, I guess all of us took our CFA some time ago, right? And the CFA syllabus is revised every year, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. In fact, recently the CFA syllabus have been revised to also include elements of fintech. So even machine learning is actually in the syllabus right now. Things like blockchain, AI. So of course, we don't actually learn to program, right? So the T comes into play whereby you span across. Hence, because of the importance of having the understanding of how some of these technologies can be applied, the CFA program actually constantly tries to stay abreast of all these developments. And I believe this addresses one other question that one of you actually brought up. What's the advice to candidates to switch their career with the recognition of CFA? I'm currently specializing in IT, and which area have overlapping expertise using CFA? So I guess to answer that, it's good that you have a IT background. You can add that on with the CFA and help you tremendously.
Yeah, get a film to your tab.
Get a film
and join us.
Oh.
Shameless plug. Shameless plug.
And okay, there's this one other question. Understood the value of CFA Charterholders to us and to the employers. I'd like to know to what extent can CFA empower us to gain competitive advantage over others as a fresh graduate. For example, I may not have graduated from a top university, but decided to take the CFA exam and practice the knowledge I've learned in the capital market. Does it make sense to compensate for my weakness as not a fresh graduate from a top university? I don't know which university you all graduate from, right? But my view is that having the degree is important, but after that, what you do next in your job matters even more. But what about CFA then? So your degree is just your minimum requirement. What about CFA? I believe that this was a point that we actually highlighted earlier. It does give you a competitive advantage simply because, well, if you go to different universities, unfortunately, there's always the brand name recognition. Some universities are more well-known than others, but the CFA program is globally recognized. Whether you sit for the exam, where do you all take your CFA? In Malaysia or Malaysia?
Yeah, I took it. I took my
So all took it in Malaysia. So
advice.
it doesn't matter whether you sit for the exam in KL or in New York, in Tokyo, or in Hong Kong. Everyone actually goes through the same process, so it's a global standard. So if you pass, this qualification works anywhere else in the world. So the recognition is definitely there. So it's something good to add on to the CV, definitely. Right?
Yeah, and I think it actually enhances your education background. Like if let's say if you have a CV and then let's say under your education and probably you don't have your university is not so popular. And I think having CFA there definitely like kind of highlights your whole profile stuff. Like it definitely does add on to your CV.
There was the question of recognition. So I think, I guess for KP especially, you're still kind of in the financial services industry. But for the other panelists here, how do your employers, those employers are from a non-financial services industry, how do they view the charter? Or do they even know about the charter in the first place?
For myself, basically, yes. it's quite I mean, even though I'm from a tech industry and I'm currently working close to finance as well, finance department, because treasury is pretty close to finance department. It is something very precious in our industry. When you say you're a CFA Charterholder, they will like, wow, you're a CFA Charterholder, and then they will come over, approach you, and then they want to know more about it because they know that CFA, this kind of qualification, it's not easy to pass.
You mean you're referring to your colleagues in Huawei who are not in the finance function?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Even though I remember last year, there was time I went to Shenzhen for training, and then I got the opportunities to meet all those treasury managers across different regions. And then during the networking session, and we talk about it, and to be honest, they all know about this qualification, and they always want to take that. Just that something actually kept them from taking that because they know that it's pretty much difficult to pass, and that actually set their mindset from taking it.
What about from a property developer perspective? Do they know about this program?
Actually, I'm with Eco for about maybe 1 year plus really.
Right.
But prior to that, I have been through with other organizations. Basically, the employers they are well aware of CFA as a qualification. So it's quite respectable, So like at one time when I was working in Singapore, I mean, I had colleagues actually trying to take it, but unfortunately, I'm able to complete it, So it's and in a sense that with me having completed it, it sort of like garners some respect, easier to get along, especially in a foreign country, where people will somehow try to judge you and in some kind of light, from another place and all sorts of things So I think it does help.
So are you allowed to put the 3 letters at the back in the name card?
Depends. Most companies are quite flexible, so you can actually put your qualification to a name card. And of course, when you deal with respective parties, like even at certain point when you deal with bankers, analysts, those are they very well versed with CFA because being in finance and banking, sector and all that, very recognizable. So, when you deal with fund managers, analysts, even, I mean, for public listed companies, somehow you have to, one way or another, deal with a group of people, through investor relations,
Right. Okay, I have this question here which I'm going to throw to everyone, to all. It says, in case we do not have the capacity to pursue CFA now, what online courses do you suggest fresh graduate to take in order to upskill and improve our employability in the investment line? Before you answer, I'd like to point out that the CFA program is designed as a self-study course. So in fact, right now, candidates today, they even have access to this thing called a learning ecosystem, whereby all you need to have your study is any of your smart devices, phone, so you can virtually study anywhere. But of course, it is a time commitment. Back to the question, do you have any suggestions about what fresh graduate can actually take on to upskill themselves if they are thinking about moving the investment line? So he or she gave an example on Coursera, Udemy. Any suggestions? Certain topics that you have in mind that you think is relevant?
I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I don't have. So as the person rightly pointed out, I think what tech has done is basically it has also democratized education. So Coursera, Udemy, you can get basically free courses on it. You pay a small fee, you get a certified. Once you complete the course, you get a cert out of it, right? But like what Jin Yong you have mentioned earlier, I think if you're talking about time capacity, CFA is something that you can self-study. I think personally, so I think there's no right or wrong approach. So I have friends and colleagues who actually sign up with an education provider and they do it in a very structured manner. Personally, I self-study. So I think to your point, it wouldn't really take up too much of the time. I mean, time-wise, it should be manageable. It's flexible in that sense.
You mentioned about the education provider, so I just thought maybe I just want to highlight to our audience that, after all, in the middle of this career carnival, tomorrow you will get the opportunity tomorrow and Friday, you actually get the opportunity to meet our prep providers. So what they do is like you said, there's a structured approach, you get to attend classes, even though this is a self-study course, but I understand that some people will still prefer to have someone teaching them, right? So do check out the details on our Facebook page. Yes, thank you so much. This is an interesting question. The panelists move out of the financial industry. Any thoughts about moving from commercial back into the financial industry, hopefully with CFA? So I assume that this person is asking because he's trying to get into the industry. Any thoughts about that? While you're thinking, perhaps I'll share my experience. I actually come from I started in IT. My background is engineering, and I did mention that I took CFA because I want to make sure that the money I put in the stock market, I know what I'm doing with it. So the CFA charter was what allowed me to get into the industry. So my experience is actually the opposite of the panelists here. But any thoughts about people who want to, because you were in the industry, you kind of left. What about people who wants to join? Would CFA be something that they should consider?
You mean from if we were to join, if we from current out of the finance industry, we want to join that?
Not yourself individually or personally, but for someone who, let's say your colleague in Asia, who wants to join the industry but has never been in the industry, what would your advice be?
Definitely having CFA helps a lot. And when you want to apply for that particular job, the CFA will give you a tick in terms of your requirement, your prerequisite in terms of your financial knowledge. So that actually kind of enable that transition. And whether you are able to, then it will depend on ultimately which level that you are looking for. So if entry level without any financial knowledge or experience, I think definitely will go with the CFA qualification. But as you progress, I would say employers nowadays, as we progress through our career, we will look for experience as well. Because we don't want to hire someone to do a managerial job, but they have no experience in that industry. So depends on which level that I would say we are looking for. But for me, I think if with my CFA, if I were to look 5 years or 3 years down the road, if I were to want to go back to finance, I would say it's not impossible. So it's also different level. So you will do more strategizing type of work and not so operational type of work. So when you're doing more strategizing part of work in the finance industry, your finance knowledge coupled with your other experience will kind of gel very well and will give you a different perspective when you're at that different stage.
So, okay, this question, first, we're talking about from the outside in the perspective, looking into the financial services industry. Right? Is there any common misconception that you've actually encountered about the CFA program, the CFA charter, from your colleagues who are not in the industry?
I think so. The common misconception is you get a pay rise after you complete your CFA. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? I mean, happy to get it wrong on this one, so I can take it back and then negotiate for
Tell
pay
your
rise.
boss. Tell your boss.
But I think so. I think long story short, don't do it for the pay. Don't do it with an expectation of an increment or a pay rise. I think do it for the knowledge and the long-term career development. I think to add on to your point earlier, so from a person who wants to go from outside, he wants to enter the finance industry. All things equal, you have the financial knowledge and whatnot, maybe from a CFA or your self-learning or whatnot. A person who has actually completed the CFA curriculum actually sends a signal. So signaling theory, right? Basically, the CFA curriculum is not easy. So every year there is quite a high standard in terms of passing up. Basically, there's a bell curve. So not everyone will pass. And of course, I think how many hours recommended to complete the course, I think the one you probably will be more familiar. So basically, it's not a qualification that's easy given. So it does show your interest and the determination to break into the industry, right? And I think that definitely will add value to employers.
To add to that, it's 300 hours on average. Across each level, there's 3 levels. So this survey has been done every couple of years with all the candidates. So usually it's about close to 280, 290, level 1, and then as it goes to level 2, level 3, it gets higher, but on average, 300 hours, yes.
Yeah, and not to forget, you have a full-time job as well.
Yes.
So yeah, I think you definitely show the determination and interest.
Interesting point about the pay rise thing. So yes, it is a very common question that I get because I visit the universities to talk about the CFA program, and one of the things that they will ask is, do I get a pay rise? So yes, it's good that you brought it up. No, you don't. So that we don't actually have statistics to say that you have X amount, you don't have, this is the amount. But the benefits is definitely visible.
But again, to caveat, I'm not directly in the investment or management or research industry. So you could have people who have gotten a pay rise out of it.
Yes, there are certain organizations that do have a policy to say that if you have passed the chart, you have passed the exam and you gain the charter, you will get this amount. Right? Yeah. But not everyone, not everywhere, not uniformly.
I think monetary value definitely will come when there's more opportunities for you. Sometimes there's a lot of opportunities, doors that actually opens for you. They actually, commensurate back to your qualification and so on. And regarding on the misconceptions that you mentioned earlier on, I think I came across with 2 misconceptions. Firstly, when you have full-time job, is it very difficult for you to pass? I think it's all about self-discipline. Because I met one of my study buddy. She was a mother of 2 at that time.
Wow.
And then she studied CFA level 1 and level 2 while still need to juggle her time to take care and to babysit her children. And then during level 3, she was pregnant. And when she sat for the exam, she was already 7 months.
Really have
pregnancy.
seduced her.
Yeah, and then she still passed. So I think what actually, it's not about what full-time job actually kept our limit. It's about your mindset. When you have a goal, you set that, and you're very determined, to aim for that. You definitely can make a breakthrough. So this is the first misconception that I'd like to tell the audience. Full-time job doesn't define you, or maybe you're tired of something. As long as you are determined to ace, I think definitely will push through, because as long as you spend like averagely 300 hours, I guess. Right? Yep. And then the second misconception, I think it happened in Malaysia before. I'm not sure you guys read about this newspaper. Some guy from Penang, I think he was a scammer, and he said pass CFA all 3 levels within a year.
Okay.
So these are non-industry always ask me, so CFA, would you actually pass everything within a year? So no, you actually have to set that 3 years plus 3 levels, maybe 3.5 years, maybe. Yeah. And 900 hours to study that.
interesting. I didn't know about that. Okay. I guess we all agree that right now in a world where there's so many changes that's happening very rapidly, of course, one of the things would be the ongoing pandemic, right? But now, this one is addressed to all of you because you're all in different industries. Is there any involving teams or drivers within your industry, right? And how does those things impact your role moving forward? Anyone can start off.
Well, I think I can start off.
Sure.
Yeah, so my industry, the industry that I'm working for now is one of the most impacted ones, I don't know.
Nice.
Yes. But I think the theme going forward would be it will be very tech driven. So we are trying to push forth contactless travel. So it will all be seamless so that you can travel without touching stuff. You just have your phone, your passport. So even passport probably you just show to scan. So you don't need to give like officer, immigration officer. So what we are pushing for now, it's not just Malaysia, not just Asia, but globally it's contactless travel to basically minimize the risk of contracting the virus when you're traveling. Because we think that travel is, you can't not travel, like it's actually to me personally, I think it's a necessity. You can't lock down people forever, right?
I hope not.
Yeah, so eventually, travel is a must, and it's just how different parties come together to make sure that the journey is safe. And I think we can do that. So it will be very technologically driven.
And I understand that you mentioned that Asia is not just in airlines, it's also in other segments which tech plays a huge role.
Yes, so we are now a travel tech company. So it's not just airlines, so we are going to e-commerce, we are going into digital platforms, trying to create an ecosystem for our customers and for our guests. And eventually you have everything in just one app.
One app to rule them all.
Yes. To travel from A to B, do everything.
KP.
Yeah. So I think from my experience, I think finance industry in general, tech is the last to be sort of disrupted by the whole tech revolution. And then maybe because it's a highly regulated industry and for obvious reasons. So, the trust, protect investors' money, etc. But I think of late, the regulators are very open about it. In fact, certain regulators in certain parts of the world are actually the one that's pushing the industry to digitalize, so to speak, right? So with tech, with new business model, the traditional business model will be disrupted. So I think for people in the finance industry, it's probably very important to keep up to date, right? So that you remain relevant. I think similarly, like what you mentioned earlier, the CFAs has also evolved with time, basically incorporating new areas into its curriculum like machine learning, etc. Yeah. So I think as finance professionals, while you have the traditional solid foundation, the traditional knowledge, so to speak, you also have to always keep up with times, like which I think in this sense, CFA also did a very good job in the sense that they always send out newsletter, education materials that sort of help chartered analysts to sort of keep in touch with the times that they want to.
Thanks. Yifeng, how has the pandemic affected the property sector and your job in particular?
I think I actually mentioned it earlier, in terms of my role, the impact. But of course, since we are talking about technology, right, I think technology also affects every industry, so even property development as well.
In what way?
So it's from marketing to even buyers' experience, from booking right up to services to the buyers, after sales services, or even about billing, and even back-end support and all that. So many organizations are basically on digital transformation. So some from various angles, and it actually improve on efficiency, work efficiencies, to improve productivity for of the staff.
I think with regards to property, something that stood out to me recently is the virtual reality viewing of showrooms.
Yeah. True.
Because recently I was looking, so I said, wow, okay, this is impressive.
You can't do it physically
Yeah.
anymore. So during the MCO, so there's this virtual building of your apartment, so to speak. So you can do inspection and then check out your units.
Also, your unit itself, and not the sample unit, but your unit itself.
Yeah.
I see.
The real unit, like you just view it, remotely.
Remote. Okay.
Instead of physically.
Zoom in to look for the defects.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Last but not least, the tech company.
Evolving, I guess. I think one of the key points I would like to stress out would be moving forward, the teams will evolve into cloud and AI segments, especially this the pandemic impact globally as well. So in order to make sure those experience still remains seamless, we actually the industry is actually trying very hard to expedite the digitalizations by using those cloud. Whatever your information, it could be actually stored inside the cloud, and also with the sustainable network, for example 5G, it can actually drive the entire experience like cloud and AI, because with this kind of the network, it can ensure that, for example, like you're having autonomous mobile on the street. So without a sustainable network, it might actually, there's a time lapse delay, and it might actually occur any accident. So with that kind of speed, with that kind of bandwidth, it will actually ensure the seamless experience for those this kind of technology innovation.
You mentioned about 5G and connectivity. I just remember something that I talked about. Nowadays, in the old days, if you leave your house and you forgot to bring your wallet, right? Nowadays, it's not about the wallet. If you forgot your phone, no matter how far you are, I think you actually make a U-turn and get it, because if not, the whole day, I think you'll be very uneasy.
Yeah.
Not knowing whether there's anything happening.
True that, because we are already highly dependent on mobile phones right now, including payments.
Everything.
Yeah.
So you can actually leave your house without a wallet, but you don't leave it without a phone.
Yes.
Right. So let me just see. I believe that's our questions that we have. I think we have addressed most of the questions. So to say that, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you here for spending your precious time to actually drop by at our office here to also share your experience and also your outlook on some of your industries, and also moving forward, what is important and how the CFA Charter has actually helped you in each of your respective careers. So thank you very much for your time, right? And to our audience, thank you so much for listening in. So this is just one of the webinars. We still have further programs outlined for the rest of the week. As mentioned earlier, tomorrow between 2 to 6, you get to meet some of the prep providers. These are the education providers, as well as also some of the employers that we are featuring during the Career Carnival. So for details, you can always go to our Facebook page to actually get to know the slots and also the timing. So with that, again, thank you very much and thank you for listening. So yeah, that's a wrap.